I'm a proud Floridian. At the time of this story in the early 2000s, I was going to college in South Florida and lived with my family in my hometown in the Florida Panhandle. It's about a 7-hour drive up through Central Florida to get between the two places, so I mostly just went home for the holidays. It was the Thanksgiving of my junior year, and I was excited that I had managed to rearrange my midterms to be able to leave the campus 3 days ahead of everyone else. I was expected to beat the masses of traffic and was hoping for a quick trip back home. My roommates wanted to have our last meal together before we all left on break, so I ate in the campus dining hall around 4 p.m., and I set off on my journey around 5:30 p.m. Around 10 p.m. I had just passed my 2/3 mark, where I always stopped at this little mom and pop's type of diner by the side of the highway to grab a snack, use the restroom, and call my dad to let him know I was okay. I didn't have a cell phone yet. Well, I hadn't been there since summer, and the place was out of business. A little bummed out that I wouldn't get my chocolate chip pancakes, I just kept going. There really wasn't much built up around there at that time, so when I saw the signs for a rest stop in, of all places on God's green earth, some bumfuck town called Alucia, I went for it. I went and parked directly under the streetlight for safety, and used the facilities, called my dad, etc. I didn't see anyone else there, except for a very exhausted-looking woman who approached me asking for directions, saying she was with her husband and 2 small children from Virginia and they made a wrong turn on their way to get to Disney. So I left the rest area and was walking back to my car when I noticed a beat-up, unmarked, gray or bluish work van parked extremely close to the driver's side of my '95 Honda Civic. I thought that was pretty weird. It had Florida tags on it, so it couldn't have been the ladies I just talked to in the bathroom. I distinctly remembered she said she was from Virginia. I turned around and hightailed it back to the rest stop, promptly running into some random middle-aged guy with 2 little boys. Getting to talk to him, it turned out it was his wife I had spoken to, as she emerged from a bathroom seconds later, and I felt comfortable speaking to him. I told him what was going on with the van, and how I didn't know what to do. He said he'd go check it out. He left the kids with his wife and strutted up to the driver's side of the van. He stood there for a moment before speaking. His voice awkwardly quivered, but we could hear him yell it from where we were standing some 100 feet away. "Excuse me, gentlemen, we already called the police, so I'm going to have to politely suggest that you get out of here." And then he ran back at us, grabbing his wife and kids, pointing to me with a swift, "You," and said, "Come on, let's get in the car now." And we ran, together. So there I was sitting confused in the back of this stranger's SUV, while he went and used the payphone to presumably call the police. Meanwhile, the van peeled out of there. I have never seen someone get the fuck out of there quite like they got the fuck out of there. They ran up on the curb on their way out. They burned rubber. It was almost comical. The cops got there and I found out what happened. The man went to go check out the van, and he could see it pretty well because I had parked under the streetlight. The first thing he noticed was that all of the seats except for the driver's seat had been removed. There was a guy sitting in the driver's seat, and a guy sitting in the back, a tarp laid out in the back, and a bunch of other random items back there that he couldn't immediately identify. Neither of the guys were reading a newspaper or a map or anything. They were apparently both just sitting there. It makes me sick thinking about it. I'm a male nurse at a large hospital in San Francisco. I work in the ER, and as is custom Thanksgiving night, it was very busy. My wife is also a nurse for the same hospital. She works in labor and delivery. Between babies being born left and right and other people coming into the ER, we hadn't had a chance to take a break together as we try to do every shift. So when she called, I figured it was to say she wanted to meet up for a bit to eat in the cafeteria. When I answered, I heard a male voice screaming profanities in the background, and my wife, who was fluent in Spanish, trying to calm this guy down. She told me their pager wasn't working and that they needed security stat. I quickly hung up, called security, told my fellow nurses what was going on, and ran for labor and delivery, worried sick about my wife. When I got there, I almost ran smack dab into this visibly angry man. He wasn't huge, but bro definitely worked out. And not at a gym. He was covered in prison tattoos and was obviously a banger. I work out regularly, but I knew this guy could kick my ass. He looked at me, gave me this sick grin, and then started heading towards me, spouting off in Spanish. I don't speak fluent Spanish, but what I did understand scared the living shit out of me. I'm backing up as fast as I can. I start buzzing on the door to the ER frantically for them to let me in. This guy's literally a foot away from me, and the door opens and I'm pulled into safety by a doctor. Gangbanger punches the door a few times, making a dragging sign across his throat while grinning at us. Next thing I know, the police rush into the corridor he's in, and it takes 2 security officers and 2 cops to subdue this guy. I finally make it to my wife, who thankfully was shaken up but unhurt. She explained to me what happened. A young girl, only 14, came in, high fever, vomiting, distending belly. The banger claimed he was her brother, and they needed to cut her open to get the baby. They did an ultrasound, and to their horror, they realized she wasn't pregnant. She had bags of drugs in her stomach. It's very common for drug mules to bring over young women from Mexico carrying drugs that way. Homeboy freaked out when they informed him his sister needed emergency surgery, and he wasn't getting his drugs. Thankfully, the girl survived, but the sad thing is she's most likely going to be deported once she recovers. I was driving back to my college from my family's house after Thanksgiving break. I was traveling through a rural area in the Midwest when I suddenly had the urge to pee badly. I was reading all the road signs I came across to see if there was a nearby town that I could stop at and find a gas station or something to use their restrooms. Unfortunately, the nearest town was 30-ish miles away and I had to pee so badly. It was unbearable. I finally made the decision to get off at the next exit that I found, even though they don't lead to any towns. Shortly after I pulled off on the next exit, I came across a gravel road. I thought this was perfect because I didn't have to get in trouble for exposing myself in front of anybody. It was a very private road. Just so you all are aware, I am a female. It is very difficult for females to pee on the side of the road. I thought the best course of action would be to just take my empty McDonald's cup and pee into that. I did just that, inside my car, just in case anyone drove down the lonely road. I had just finished my business and was dumping the cup. I did not litter, only dumped the contents into the grass on the side of the road. I was starting my car and getting ready to turn my car around back the way I came when I saw a bright red car speeding down the road I was on. It startled me, but they drove right on past. I thought to myself, must be the locals out messing around. I started to drive off, and I saw a dingy, rusted red pickup truck coming down the road after the car. They too drove past me. As they passed, I saw 2 male passengers who were staring straight at me. This freaked me out, but I told myself all the more reason to get a move on. I still kept my eye on the pickup truck though, and I saw them turning around coming straight at me. This freaked me out so much I decided the best course of action would be to drive in their direction, continuing on the gravel road, as opposed to turning around and giving them the opportunity to chase after me. I drove right by them and saw that they were grinning at me. I was so scared I hit the gas, which on a gravel road doesn't do much good. I finally got a grip on the road and headed along the gravel. I looked in my rearview mirror and they were following me again. I was freaked out. My hands were shaking, my foot was flooring the accelerator, and I reached for my phone. I'm not the person to call 911 in just any situation. In fact, I was scared to call 911 because I was afraid I was just being paranoid. But as I looked in my rearview mirror again and saw them gaining on me, I called the police. When I called the police, the operator picked up and I explained to her what was happening. During this phone call, the men in the pickup truck were so close that I couldn't see their front tires. I was sliding all over the gravel road, trying to stay on the phone with the operator. She was giving me directions to the nearest town several miles away. They followed me the entire way there, all the way until I reached the police station. I saw them turn around very quickly because they knew I was out of their reach. I definitely learned a lesson from this, and I think from now on I'll stick to peeing in public restrooms. This all took place in November of last year. I booked an entire trip in order to propose to my then girlfriend. Flew us both out to Florida to go to Disney World, the last concert of one of our favorite bands, Berlin, and of course propose. We had a blast. I proposed in the Disney castle. She said yes. Everything went well. We took off the next morning, Thanksgiving Day, on the way home, connecting through San Francisco. About 30 minutes into the flight, the captain comes over the intercom and announces that one of our engines wasn't depressurizing properly. We do a loop back to the airport and get unloaded into the terminal as we await another plane to be readied. My now fiancée switched her phone back from airplane mode, and within a minute she has 10 plus voicemails all from the same number, which she didn't know. Fearing the worst, we called the numbers without listening to any of the voicemails. I knew something was wrong as soon as she started talking to them. Her face went blank and she didn't say a word. I told her to give me the phone and she did. I asked who it was, and the voice I heard back just sounded dead. Absolutely no hint of emotion in it. All he said was, "I will kill you both as soon as you land in Seattle." I asked who he was again and he just hung up. She said she had no idea who it was, and I certainly didn't know the voice. I called him back, and he would answer and just repeat the time that we were landing. Little did he know we were delayed for hours. I used to work in telecom, and I pulled some strings to get a name and address from the phone number that he used. Neither of us knew the name, nor the address. She looked him up on Facebook and saw that she had one mutual friend with him. Her ex-best friend. We'll call her Karen. That she was no longer friends with as she had gotten wrapped up in heavy drug usage and stole from my fiancé. We did a little more digging around and found out that he was the boyfriend of Karen's new best friend. My theory is Karen saw all of the posts my fiancé was posting on social media about the trip, the engagement, and the great time we were having, and she was pissed and wanted to piss on our parade. I didn't take it as a joke, however. A death threat is a death threat, and in my mind as meth heads they could follow through with it on a whim. I called him and talked over his rambling and told him I was armed, knew where he lived, and was not afraid to take things into my own hands. He hung up on me, so I called the Seattle area law enforcement, and they told me to call back on a non-holiday. So I called the emergency line, and they reiterated the same statement. We were on our own. We ended up flying in close to 9 hours after our original arrival time. Once we landed, we both had a single voicemail. Hers I assumed was from the guy, and mine I had no idea, as he hadn't been calling on my phone. My voicemail was from my dad, who said he had gotten a call from my neighbor saying that my mailbox had been destroyed. Looked into it and it had been hit by a car and the mail stolen from it. Her voicemail, however, was the guy screaming, "Where were you? How dare you?" and plenty of other threats and random yelling. I drove home and dropped off my fiancée at her house, insisting she not come with me to my place in case there was someone still there. They threw a brick through my window with an old picture of my fiancée and Karen attached to it. I tried to call him, to no answer. I went to bed after covering up the window with a tarp and making sure my fiancée was okay. I filed a police report the next day. They said I couldn't do anything without seeing them on my property. We blocked everyone involved on social medias and went about our lives. I didn't hear from him for 3 weeks, when he sent a picture of my fiancée working. I immediately called her and told her to get to the back of her work, a bubble tea shop. I then called mall security to explain the situation, but by the time they got to the food court, where the picture was taken from, he was gone. At this point, I was done messing around. I knew his address, and swung by and dropped off a note attached to a critical defense .40 bullet, saying, "This is your last chance to leave her alone. This is your only warning." It's been almost 9 months now. Haven't heard a word or seen them again. Luckily, this story doesn't involve me being chased, almost kidnapped, stalked, etc. But it is still one of the strangest things that has ever happened to me. I think about what happened from time to time, and sometimes I feel as though maybe I was overreacting. But then I remember how I felt like my stomach was in my throat and my heart was going to burst out of my chest, and I know that my fear was justified. I never told my parents or the parents of the kids I was babysitting, which, looking back, was probably really stupid. This happened when I was about 14. I had just started babysitting for this family in my neighborhood. They had 2 kids, a boy who was at the time 10, and a girl who was at the time 8. They were great kids to babysit. They got along with each other without fighting, and always did what I asked them without complaining. Before I launch into what happened, I'm going to give you all some background information about the family's house, so that y'all can understand why I was so freaked out. The house is situated pretty far back in my neighborhood on this little side street off the main road that runs through the neighborhood. The house is in a cul-de-sac, so there's not a lot of traffic on the road at all. Usually the only people that ever come into the cul-de-sac are the mailman and the people who live in the other 3 houses that were in the cul-de-sac. The street itself was not very long at all, so there were only 3 houses on each side of the street that weren't in the cul-de-sac. Essentially, despite being in a very large neighborhood, the street that this house was situated on was very quiet, and if you didn't live in the neighborhood, you might not even know that this street existed. It was a fall Friday night. Pretty sure it was in late November, right after Thanksgiving, and I arrived at the house around 6. The kids were already sitting down eating dinner when I got there, and the parents told me that they expected to be home around midnight or so. The parents also made a joke about how the kids had the whole street to themselves, since the other families that lived there were out of town for Thanksgiving. The parents left, the kids finished eating, and we went outside to play in the cul-de-sac. I remember locking the front door and taking my house key outside with me. The kids rode around on their scooters for about an hour. For some reason, I just felt really on edge while the kids were playing outside. I chalked this feeling up to knowing that we were alone on the street since everyone else was out of town. After the kids finished playing outside, we went inside to play on the Wii in the basement. I remember locking the front door once we were back inside and putting the key on the kitchen counter. I then checked the front door again before I went down into the basement. I was super vigilant about checking the doors because I had watched so many scary movies where the babysitter forgets to lock the door and then some crazy murderer gets into the house and blah blah blah. As the kids are playing in the basement, I get that unsettling feeling again. I didn't feel like we were being watched. It was more like when you know that something is going to pop out in a scary movie, and you're just anticipating it on the edge of your seat. The feeling sticks with me the entire time we're in the basement, but again I chalk it up to knowing that the entire street is empty. The clock strikes 10 and it's time for the kids to head to bed. We go to the top floor of the house where the kids' bedrooms are. The house is set up so when you open the front door of the house to come inside, you're standing in the foyer, with the stairs to go up to the top floor directly in front of you. If you're standing in the foyer, you can see all the way up the stairs into the bedroom on the top floor. So the kids are in the bathroom brushing their teeth, and we all hear a car pull in their driveway. I figure it's their parents coming home super early, and I expected to hear the garage door start opening. But that sound never comes. I walk into the girls' bedroom and look out their front window. There's a car running in the driveway, and there's a man in the car, but the headlights are turned off despite it being 10 p.m. and pitch black outside. I figured it was just someone who was lost in our neighborhood and was just using the driveway to stop and get their bearings before heading back out on the main road. I leave the girls' bedroom and head back into the bathroom where the kids were. Suddenly, I hear a knock on the front door. I turn around and there's a man standing at their door holding a pizza box. There are 2 long windows on either side of the front door, so I have a clear view of this guy, and I know he has a clear view of us. I immediately get that eerie feeling that I had been feeling all night. I asked both the kids if they had ordered a pizza for some reason, and they both said no. These kids were always very honest, and wouldn't lie about something like that, or even order a pizza without asking me. So I knew they were being truthful. Normally, I would have gone downstairs to see what this guy wanted. Maybe he had the wrong house and I could point him in the right direction. But that little voice in my head was screaming, "Do not go downstairs. Do not open that door." The guy also didn't look like he worked for any pizza company. Normally they would wear a uniform or a hat with the company's logo on it, or something. This guy just seemed off. He looked like he was in his late 30s, early 40s, and looked super disheveled. His shirt was really wrinkled, his pants were filthy and ripped, and he had this ratty black baseball cap that was pulled down super far so his eyes were covered. He was also grinning really aggressively. Like I thought this guy's teeth would just shatter because of how hard he was pressing them together. At this point, the kids notice him and start asking why he's here. Should we open the door, etc. I tell them no and ask them to just go to their rooms and lie down. The boy goes to his room, and I walk the girl into her room and look out the window at the car again. I notice the car doesn't have one of those pizza delivery car signs on top, which all of the pizza companies in my town required drivers to have. So now I really feel confident in my initial intuition that this guy isn't a legit pizza delivery guy. The girl gets in bed, and I come back out of her room and sit at the top of the stairs so that I can keep an eye on this guy. I tried to stay calm so as to not upset the kids, even though I was flipping out on the inside. He's still standing at the door holding the pizza box in one hand, and he's still grinning that teeth-shattering grin. His mouth almost looks too big for his face. Even though I can't see his eyes because of the hat, I know that he's dead-ass staring at me. Then, without breaking eye contact, he starts jiggling the door handle pretty aggressively, while still grinning. I silently thank God that I was so psychotic about making sure the front door was locked. He stops jiggling the handle and resumes staring at me. If I was in this situation now, I probably would have called the police immediately. But being only 14 and fairly new to babysitting, I was paralyzed with fear. I felt like if I took my eyes off him for even a second, when I looked back, he would be standing at the base of the stairs. After about another 5 minutes of the stare down, he literally starts walking backwards off their porch without breaking eye contact. Legit, this dude was walking backwards towards his car while staring at me. I go into the parents' bedroom, which also has a view of the driveway, kneel down in front of the window, and peek out. I'm expecting to see the guy getting into his car. Nope, the guy is nowhere in sight, but the car is still there. So I return to my perch at the top of the stairs, half expecting to see him at the door again, or worse, standing at the bottom of the stairs. But he was nowhere to be seen. After about 20 minutes, I hear a car starting. I run back to the parents' bedroom, kneel in front of the window again, and notice that the car in the driveway has started and the guy is sitting in the driver's seat, still fucking grinning. He also doesn't turn the headlights on. He shifts into reverse and begins backing slowly out of the driveway, grinning the entire time. Right before he drives off, he turns his head, and I swear to God makes direct eye contact with me. Again, I can't see his eyes because of the hat, but I know that he was looking at me. This is really disturbing to me, since he really didn't know where I was in the house. The parents' bedroom is the furthest down to the right if you're looking at the house from outside. The lights in the parents' bedroom are off, and I'm kneeling down, so really the only part of me that might potentially be visible is the top of my head, my eyes, and my nose. But it's also pitch black outside. He doesn't have his headlights on, and it's pitch black in the parents' bedroom, so I doubt that I was really visible. He also didn't spend time scanning the windows. His head literally just snapped to where I was. It's like he could sense where I was. After I had time to calm down and collect myself, I started replaying what had happened and came to the following conclusions. This guy was not a pizza delivery guy. He had no uniform, looked and acted like he was possessed or something, and his car was unmarked. Those 20 minutes or so that elapsed between when he was walking backwards off the porch to when he got into the car were probably spent walking around the house and checking all of the doors, trying to gain entry. He had malicious intent. Maybe he was there to rob the house. Maybe he wanted to do something more sinister to me and the kids. Either way, this guy was bad news, and I'm glad that I trusted the voice in my head. I think he probably found some pizza delivery box and tried to pose as a pizza delivery guy to get me to open the door to him so he could strike. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. And if you don't, that's subscribe, like, and share it with your friends, people. And if you would like to hook yourself up with some cool Urmaker merch, make sure you go check out my Spreadshirt, or even go check out my Patreon for some other cool rewards. Or also very soon I'm going to have a new support feature on YouTube which I will be explaining in the future. So keep an eye out for that as well. I hope everyone celebrating Thanksgiving is going to have a good holiday. If all goes well, this will actually be up a little before Thanksgiving. For those that aren't celebrating, I hope you're just having a wonderful day. And I really appreciate everyone coming to check out this video. I'll catch you guys in the next one. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true. Yeah, true, baby. Bad bye.